So I'm going to add a client so you can see how that looks. And so to add a client, we're going to go back to the search button up here. And I'm going to pretend that we searched for our client and we could not find them. So we've tried their name and did not find them. We tried their date of birth. We did not find them. And we tried the last four of their social and did not find them. I recognize it seems a little tedious to try all three, but we do recommend that before you add a client, you try all three ways of locating them first. Misspellings happen. We do get sometimes the date of birth is off by a date, or maybe the social security number is off by a digit. So we want to try all three methods before we add a client record. The system, if there is already a record in here, the system will not say, hey, this client already exists. Do you want to, are you sure you want to add them? There's only one place where it gives us that one thing, and that's on the social security number. Everywhere else, whether it's a name or a date of birth, it will allow duplicates because folks can be born on the same day. So again, please be sure to search all three ways before you add a client record. If you do come across duplicate records in your work, you can email us at hmis@sacstepsforward.org and I can merge those accounts for you. Unfortunately, it's not something that is done with the average HMIS user. It is something that only admins can do. The reason I'm really stressing this is I have had to merge records where a client had 4 separate records. So those are things that we're wanting to avoid. So to add a new client, really easy. You'll see the search for a client, and then to the right, add a client. I'm going to hit the plus sign. And this is where it's going to take us. So before I get into actually creating a record, one of the things we need to do is talk to our clients about HMIS and how to consent to be in HMIS. So essentially, I like to talk this out with everybody first. Is one, we should have paper forms when we're working with clients to be able to give it to them so they can read it, they can review it. We want to explain what they are consenting to. Our release of information, as I said earlier, is good for 7 years. We need to provide them a copy of it and also a copy of the consumer notice. And I'm going to go to the PDF forms really quick. Here is the consumer notice for Sacramento. This one is for just the average project. And then this one is for a HUD-funded project. That is the only difference. These do need to be posted in your offices, in lobbies, or where clients can see and review them. If you're a field worker, I recommend that you print one out, possibly laminate it, so that way when you're out in the field, you can show them this, so that way they have seen it and reviewed it. Here is YOLO's consumer notice. And then we have our release of information. So both the consumer notice and the release of information talks about the data we collect in HMIS. It talks about how we use that data for understanding homelessness in our community, but also how it's benefiting the clients. We use this data to record their services and outcomes in our programs to know what was working for them. It also helps us refer them to other housing projects. And so that's what all of this is. And then at the very bottom, we have a couple options. They could either check this box here, and they're giving authorization for their and their dependents to have their information recorded in HMIS, but also shared with partner agencies. Or they're saying, you can have my information in HMIS, but we do not want you to share it with partner agencies. And so the reason why I'm stressing this is, depending on how they sign off, depends on their profile or client record type. So within HMIS, we can have a public profile or record. What that means is they've signed the consent form and they agreed to share with partner agencies. So if they agree, then their record is visible to all of us if we go to that client record. Private profile or record means that they agreed to be in HMIS, but they did not want their information shared with partner agencies. So at that moment, we would toggle their record to private, and I'll show you how to do that. And what that would mean is that record would not exist to anybody outside of your agency. And then the last option we have is if they don't sign consent to be an HMIS, in other words, that we do not have an ROI, then what we can do is we can make an anonymous profile or client record, meaning that we can still record data in HMIS, but we are not using their names, their social security number, or their actual date of birth. We would be using things like client refused, or maybe your agency has a second database where they have another unique ID number. Maybe you're using that as their name. For their social, we would use a completely fake number, and I'll show you what those look like. And then for their date of birth, we would typically just use the year they were born in January 1st. If someone is apprehensive with the public or profile or record, I always recommend talking it through first. So first things I would recommend when you're in here is give your clients the ROIs, ask them if they would like to read it themselves, have it read to them. If you have a client that is apprehensive with sharing their information with partner agencies, one of the things that I recommend is talking through what are they nervous about. Because within HMIS, we have the ability to have many layers of privacy. So the most private thing that we can do would actually be a public record, but an anonymous record. So we don't have any of their identifying their name, social, date of birth, signatures, any of those things in the record. It is just basic demographics, like year of their birth, gender, and then just what we're doing as a program with this client. So their program start and end dates, their services, all of those things. The next thing is we can have a private record. So again, this is where for your agency, all the information is in there, their full name, their full date of birth, their full social, but we made it their record private, and therefore that record does not exist to anybody but your agency. And then we have some privacy. So for example, maybe they're okay with their profile page being shared, but they don't want anyone knowing that they're in your program. We can make program enrollments private. And then the fourth layer of privacy is very specific. We can make client notes, locations, services, some things very, smaller items within HMIS private if they don't want to share those. So for example, here is the second layer where the client record has program enrollments in it. It has history of things that have happened. They have files and forms. They have assessments. They have services. They have locations. They have notes. But all of this stuff is private, and only the agency that created the record can see it. To everyone else, it does not exist. Then this is an example of the third layer where their entire record is public and shared with other partner agencies, except for one particular enrollment. They don't want to share that, so that enrollment and anything that happens within that enrollment is private, and only the agency that that program enrollment belongs to does it exist to. And the fourth layer is, this is a public record, but within the locations, the client has two locations, and location B, they don't want to share. So for example, maybe location B is their parents' home, and they can be found there once every 2 weeks, and they're okay with you knowing that, but they don't want everybody else knowing that. So then we can make that particular location private. Okay, so going back to my screen where I'm going to be adding a new client, we are going to pretend that our client said yes, they're okay with it, so we can start the record. And so what I'm going to do to show you is maybe they don't know their social security number. I can type in, I'm going to use all fives. This is something we use a lot. So if you're using a fake social security number, please make it look fake. We don't want to put in a fake number that looks real. It's okay to put in a fake number. We just need to be aware that it is fake. When I click on my next section on quality of social security number, I have the options, and you'll see I got a little pop-up box, and it says an existing client has been found matching the SSN entered. Would you like to load that client instead? So if you are working with someone and you have their actual social security number, what you would want to say is okay. If you have a real social security number and you enter it and then this pop-up comes up, it's going to take you to that other record. To kind of show you what I mean, when I click on OK, now here you'll see I have a new test client here. This is Cynthia Test, and I have a record that's been completed. If I've done this and I start typing things, it's okay. The system will only save it if you press Save Changes at the bottom. If you had actually gone through, made edits, and hit Save Changes and then realized you were on another client record, please contact us as soon as possible so I can get it back into that client record and restore it to the original information. But kind of going back to adding our client and start over. And then when this little pop-up comes up, what I want to say is cancel. So this is a little wonky. It would make more sense if we said yes and no. However, think of okay as yes, cancel is no. So no, I don't want to load that other client. So I'm going to hit cancel. And now it lets me continue. And you'll see that here's that red bar. It means it's not letting me save anything until I have everything completed. So when we use a fake number, what we want to do is we want to say approximate or partial. So this is usually when we have part of a social security number, but not all of it. But then we can say client doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected. If we're working with someone who is undocumented, what we want to use is client doesn't know. We can use client refused, and data not collected means we did not bother to ask the question. This is a negative impact on our report to HUD. So whenever you see a situation, a data element that says the answer is data not collected and you're working with a client, please ask the client again so we can get this information completed. Also, if you're working with a client and the answer was they don't know or they refused, it's very possible that when their record was created, they hadn't built the trust and rapport with that staff person, and so maybe they weren't comfortable providing that information. And if you've now built trust and rapport with the client, please ask them and see if we can get this information in the system correct. Then it's going to ask for name. And then it'll ask about the quality of name. So for example, the reason we have full name, partial, street name, or code name reported, client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected. I'm going to say the full name was reported, and then it's going to ask about date of birth. So I'm going to go 0101. And I'm going to say this was the full date of birth. The system will automatically calculate their age for you. Middle name is not required, but you can put it in here, as well as suffix. Alias, again, this is where you can put in street names, nicknames, previous names, maiden names, any of those things that would, if we want to record information. For example, maybe you have a person that has an old ID with their married name on it, but they've gone back to their maiden name, then we want to record that information accordingly. We then have gender assigned at birth. So our options are female, intersex, male, client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. If we are making anonymous profiles, I recommend we stick with either female or male as opposed to intersex, because there are not many folks that will say that they were intersex as assigned at birth. So it can be considered identifying information. We also wanted to ask folks how they would like to be recorded. So if you're working with someone and they appear to be female, don't assume they are female or that at birth they were female. We want to be sure we're asking these questions. Then we have gender identity. And here we have female, male, trans male, and gender nonconforming, as well as the standard 3, doesn't know, refuse, or data not collected. If you're working with someone and they say trans female, trans male, or gender nonconforming, our next question is we want to ask them if they'd like us to record it that way in HMIS. Some folks could be trans male, but they do not want it to be recorded as trans male. They may want their gender identity to just be male. If they say gender nonconforming and they'd like us to record it that way, then the next thing we have is another gender dropdown where we have gender fluid, agender, non-binary, genderqueer, two-spirited, or not listed. And if we have not listed, then we can have a text field where we can put in anything that they ask us to. And then we have sexual orientation. This question only appears on client records of folks who are 14 years of age or older. So if we're creating a client record for families, everybody in the family gets a client record. But for example, on those children 13 and under, we are not asking their sexual orientation. What we have here is gay, lesbian, heterosexual, or straight, bisexual, queer, questioning, pansexual, fluid, asexual, gray sexual, demisexual, and then the client refused and data not collected. The next two things we have are ethnicity and race. For ethnicity, we just have non-Hispanic, non-Latino, or Hispanic Latino. And then for race, we have all of these options, white, Black or African American, Asian, American Indian or Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and then our standard 3. This is the only part in HMIS where we can select multiple options. So I can select 2 of these if I'd like, or all of them, but it won't let me select all the races and one of these 3. And once I select everything, this is one of the ones where to get rid of this box after I'm done, I had needed to click off to the side. Then we have zip code of their last permanent address. This is where they were last stably housed. If you're in HMIS, this is a cloud-based software. So if someone does not know their last permanent zip code, ask them the city and go into Google Maps, put in the city and get all the potential zip codes and ask them which one they think it might be. Pick one, essentially. This really is just helping us determine if folks relocate after they become homeless. And then we've got the quality of zip code, full or partial, client doesn't know or client refused. Again, these should be, client refuses valid. If they don't know, again, we want to do what we can to try to get an estimate. And then, so I'm going to say full. It's then going to ask about their primary language. And if they're a US citizen, it's okay if someone says no, but they can refuse or say they don't know. And then when we get to veteran status, if we say yes, we have a whole host of more data fields or data elements to collect. So it's going to ask us their military service when they entered the military and when they left the military. HMIS will do exactly what we tell them, remembering that I said that this person was born in 1970. HMIS will let me put 1980. Please be aware of this. Be sure that you're collecting correct information. It is not possible for someone to enter the military when they're 10 years old. So if you notice something weird about that, ask your client again. I'm going to say my person started in 1990 and they separated 4 years later in 1994. Then we need to go through and answer for each one of these theater of operations. And so what I recommend is read through these instead of just asking your clients. And then when you get to the ones based upon their years of service, asking these ones. So if someone was in the military from 1990 to 1994, then this is where you could ask them if they were in the Persian Gulf War, Desert Storm. And then there's one last one where it says theater of operations, other operations. If you say yes to this, you don't have to put in anything else. Then it asks about the branch of the military that they served in. So we have Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. You'll notice we don't have the National Guard. While folks can be in the National Guard, when National Guard has been deployed, it's been for disasters, not for wartime. So that's why they're not considered a vet by HUD standards. Discharge status, we have honorable under general honorable conditions, other honorable conditions, bad conduct, dishonorable, uncharacterized, and then our standard 3, doesn't know, refuse, or data not collected. I'm going to say under general honorable conditions and then discharge status verified. The next thing, what you'll see at the very bottom, it says please fill in the release of information form. So this is where we need to record that they provided consent. So scrolling back up to the top and over to the right, if they are signing the consent form, permission is yes. If they are refusing to sign the client form, then this is when we need to make all of this information anonymous, and we would say their permission is a no. But again, for today's purposes, what I'm letting you all know is that we are saying that they provided consent. The start date is the date that they signed the consent form or are signing the consent form. So if you are a data entry person and you have staff that recorded all this information out in the field 3 days ago, and now they've turned all the paperwork in, and now you're adding these to HMIS, the start date is the date that the client signed that paper form. The system will automatically default it here. And then for documentation type, what we'll be doing today is the electronic signature. But if they had signed a paper copy and you say attach PDF, you would have needed to scan it into your computer. And then when you select file, it will then take you into your file explorer on your computer, so you can then attach that file just like you would attaching a file to an email. And the last one here is household. Household is what we use for minor children. So minor children, parents are signing consent for them, and for children, their start date will match, but their end date can be different. Their end date is either going to be the same as the parents if they will not be turning 18 before that date. However, if they do turn 18 before this date, then their end date is their 18th birthday. So I'm going to go to electronic signature, and I'm going to e-sign the document. And what you're going to see is this is all the same information that is on the paper form that you've received in your email. You want to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and what we'll do is then the client would need to sign. So you would just let them sign, and then you could hit apply and then save. It looks like it's completed, and now I can go down to the bottom of my screen and hit add record. And when it's all done, changes have successfully saved, and I now have a client record.